How did Alien 3 go wrong? Join me today as we explore this question. This is the Geek Cabal channel. If you've not been here before, my name's Bobbie, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about where did Alien 3 go wrong exactly. So, I guess first we have to establish, did it go wrong? And I think by box office receipts, critical acclaim, etc., that we can surmise that it did. And also we can see how much of a radical departure the next entry in the series was. That tells us that, yeah, things went off the rails somewhere. Now, I'm going to say this up front. I actually think it's an okay movie. I think that there are some problems, like just me as a viewer, I don't think this isn't like Highlander 2, I think, which I believe is the last movie I kind of tried to cover, why is it considered a bad movie? And, so there's different structural problems here, but, and I don't consider it as bad as Alien Resurrection, which I do consider to be the low point of the franchise. I still think it's an entertaining movie, but it's really got some problems. So, Alien 3. Alien 3, to my mind, one of its biggest problems, and just in general, I think a lot of the problems flow from this fact, is that it is the sequel to Aliens. And it comes in from a lot of ways. First and foremost, it tried to, at least on the surface, the way it appears to me, is that it tried to go back to the pure horror roots of Alien. And the problem is, it did so in a universe where aliens exists. And although I didn't realize this until recent-ishly, and I should have, I suppose, there's actually something of a divide over Alien and Aliens among the fan base. And I imagine whenever Alien 3 came out, this would have been a lot more pronounced. So, what I mean by that is, there are those who prefer one over the other, like really prefer one over the other and think the other is trash, or think the other is a lot lesser. And I don't know, in terms of percentages, what we're looking at here, but there are those who prefer the pure horror aesthetic of Alien, who did not like the action movie that Aliens became, and there are those who think Alien is a slow, boring slog and think Aliens is a spectacular action movie. So the problem is trying to essentially recreate the feel of Alien doesn't necessarily satisfy either of those groups, because the action people don't want to go back to boring. And the people that liked Alien don't necessarily want to see you just redo it. And, they might want something more. They want to see some things expand, which ironically they did with Aliens. So, although I imagine more of the people that liked Alien probably like Alien 3, if I had to guess. So, that's problem. That's your first kind of problem, is that it's a reversion to an earlier type, and so the people that came on board with Aliens didn't necessarily like that. And just in general, there are a lot of people who just don't like slower movies. So, you've got a lot working against you there. And then, on top of that, based on the events of the movie, you've probably completely torpedoed most of your chance of the Aliens fans coming on board. Because 4 characters survived Aliens. Ripley, Hicks, Newt, and, 3.5, and Bishop. And Newt and Hicks die off screen. And Bishop is just a wreck who asks to be put down. So that just leaves Ripley. Now, this is kind of coming back to the concept of Alien because she was the lone survivor. The problem is, in an attempt, okay, so the big problem is it had to work within the framework of what was left from Aliens. And so, number one, it had to have a major retcon at the very beginning, having eggs on board the ship, which there were not any. So, you got the major retcon, which, for the sake of the franchise continuing, I guess you can let slide. Okay, well, let's say that's fine. But then we kill two characters that the fans liked off screen, and they were left with Ripley. And then Ripley lands on a penal colony. And so now you can tell that some things were probably reverse engineered to wind up with what we have. Because, in Alien, they had basically no weapons. They had the flamethrowers, but they didn't do anything. So they may as well have had no weapons. And so you can tell that probably the scriptwriter started with, okay, I want to copy that. I want them to have no weapons, but they were just with the Marines who have lots of weapons. So how do we put them, or in this case her, in a situation where there are no weapons? And so that's when the idea of, it's a prison colony. But wait, the guards would have weapons too. So we got to go just a little bit farther. It's a prison colony in the middle of nowhere that no one ever comes to. And there's only a handful of guards and a handful of inmates. And they don't leave any weapons, so the inmates can't take over the facility. Which also nicely gets us to the whole, they are truly marooned. So it does kind of feel like, if you actually examine the elements of the plot, that they start at the end and work their way back. Because then you're like, okay, well, it's a prison planet. Well, that would probably be a male-only prison, because there's not a whole lot of co-ed prisons out there. So if it's a male-only prison, there's no other female characters. And all of our characters are either prisoners or guards. Okay, well, part of the appeal of Alien isn't just the isolation, isn't just Ripley, isn't just the lack of weapons. It was also the fact it was kind of an ensemble cast. You had, your essentially space truckers who run up against the deadliest organism in the universe, basically. And so now instead of space truckers, they're hardened criminals. And they try to make some of these characters good. And a couple of them are, decent characters. And that mainly comes through from the acting. Charles Dance's character, the Doctor, Charles S. Dutton's character, the main prisoner who seems to have genuinely found God, but also knows how to keep it real. Those two are kind of interesting. Everyone else, they're cannon fodder. You get the occasional crack here, but that's it. And same thing with the only two prison employees. There's just not a lot of character there. So, we don't have the banter, the wit, the discussion. It almost all comes from Ripley and the Doctor, or Ripley and Charles S. Dutton's character. So, and then we also have the probably inevitable situation, given that what's going on there, and as far as the prisoners trying to take advantage of Ripley. Now, given the undertones of the design of the xenomorph and everything, that's not something that the franchise is shied away from. If you look at the aesthetic of the xenomorph, a lot of H.R. Geiger's work, there's definitely a heavy emphasis on sexualization. But this is a far more, it's different when it's a person doing it to another person versus an alien organism. One is a fantastical yet horrific situation. The other happens all the time. And, makes people a little bit uneasy. So that scene probably didn't help, even though it's completely logical it would be there, because these are a bunch of men who haven't seen a woman in quite a while, and they're all violent psychopaths, so, it probably would have happened sooner if it was remotely realistic. But that scene in and of itself, that definitely didn't torpedo the movie. But, like I said, you keep running into the problem of you're following up Aliens and you're trying to copy the aesthetic of Alien, but you can't, because that relied on lack of knowledge of the creature. That relied on an ensemble cast of space truckers. Now we're in a prison. Now we're in a bunch of people that we know we're guilty. Like, we know these people, like, yeah, they might be happy-go-lucky right now, but, like, these are murderers, you know? Like, we're not really going to feel a whole lot of compassion for them when the xenomorph tears them apart. You know, we don't really care to get to know most of them. There's no real depth to any of their characters. There's no tremendous interpersonal conflict. We know that Ripley knows what she's talking about. We know she knows she's in the right. We know these other people are just buffoons, and they're going to die as a result. So it becomes a little predictable. And yeah, so you've just got this host of problems. And then the xenomorph itself, that's not really an issue. Like the fact that it, prefers to run on all fours and everything, it came out of an animal instead of a human being. And that was kind of the first hint we got that the creature it gestates in has an impact on the xenomorph itself. So that idea seems to originate from there. So plus column for that. Although we've never really seen it really, truly explored in the franchise. Only in more like the comic books and the video games. So you've got things like that happening. But again, like on a personal level, we only really care about Ripley. And so it makes it less impactful when the other people die. See, in Aliens, we knew Ripley knew what she was talking about, but we were confronted with new information that Ripley did not know. And we had a whole cast of colorful characters, We had, Hudson, Hicks, Vasquez, He's not, super colorful, but there was Drake, Bishop, Apone. Apone was colorful, Burke, total sleazeball. Like, we had these characters that you remember. I can picture the people from Alien 3. Don't know the names of any of the prisoners. I don't even know the doctor's name. I just know he's the doctor. And so you've got these structural issues where you're trying to go backwards and you're not satisfying anything. I think a far better approach would have been to branch out to other characters. To have maybe as Hadley's hope was falling apart, a ship did escape, knowingly or unknowingly, with a special friend on board. And now we're going to follow those characters. So that yes, Ripley can leave thinking that she has completely wiped these things out. And then we'll follow these other characters while Ripley is off over here. And then maybe at some point their paths cross again, where hopefully Hicks and Newt are still alive. So, there was several better ways to do it. There was that. There was Ripley not thinking she had destroyed them all, and realizing, well, that ship came from somewhere, and presumably that's not the only ones in all the universe that were aboard that ship. So maybe Ripley, decides that they're going to try to find out where these things came from, and that would be a little difficult, but you could probably go along with something like they go back, they don't go into hyper, you'd have to retcon the end of Aliens a little bit, but you would have them not go into hypersleep and go back to the ship, say it survived the nuclear blast, and they're going to see if there's some kind of control panels or flight logs or something, anything, or just to make sure that all the xenomorphs aboard there are destroyed, or that they're intercepted on the way back by Weyland-Yutani people and are forced into some other scenario that involves the xenomorphs. Like, I think that actually happened in the comics. But there's plenty of other things that you could do. But you definitely should not have killed off Newt and Hicks. Like, that was ridiculous. Maybe if they would die during the course of the movie, okay. But beyond that, like, I just feel like that was also part of the whole, we probably started at the end and worked our way backwards. And we're like, well, these things wouldn't happen to Ripley if Hicks was there, because he'd beat the ever-living crap out of these guys. Plus, Newt being there would be a definite problem. But yeah, so again, like I said, that comes back to the whole, it seems like reverse engineering to get to where you want it. Which, you also have the somewhat lore-defying problem of Ripley has one inside her throughout the entire movie. And she should have died, like, much earlier. Because from everything we've seen, these things only take, like, a day, once the facehugger comes off, to pop out of your chest. And there's nothing special about anything happening to Ripley. So there's no reason that it should have taken that long. And so from a lore standpoint, that seems kind of like an ass pull, 2/3 of the way through the movie, where you're like, oh, she has one of them inside of her. Great. Like, how did that happen exactly? And you're kind of back to like, well, we wanted this to happen, so we got to backtrack and make it happen over here, because this is the only point it could have happened, unless there were more facehuggers somewhere, which as far as we know there's not. There's just the one that infected the dog, or bull, depending on which version of the movie you see. And, yeah, so you got that lore-defying aspect there, which leads you to the kind of absurd ending where you have the guy who is presumably the guy who actually designed the Bishop android, but we don't know that for sure, because whenever you see where he gets hit in the side of the head, like, his ear kind of like disconnects, which could happen, but like it's not flopping down, it's still like held in there, and so he might also be a robot, who knows. And that was just this total random, where did this come from moment. And so, that doesn't really work. Then on top of that, like, Weyland-Yutani sends him and like 2 guys, really? Instead of like a whole commando team down there. Then you've got Ripley sacrifices herself to kill the alien. Now, that comes across as a finale, some closure, some catharsis, something like that. But it doesn't really work, because we don't actually know that all the eggs were destroyed. Plus, again, they're not native to LV-426. So she's not, like, if she's thinking she's killing them all, she's delusional. And I mean, stopping that one, sure, it's a queen, that's bad news. But, there were others elsewhere. So, it's one of those, okay, but the franchise could continue at that point. And that's the other thing, is like, if you're going to stop it there. Ripley's dead. But that's not where things stopped. Went on to the next one. It's like, hey, let's bring back the Xenomorphs and Ripley. And again, we're having to start with the base concept and work our way backwards there. The base concept is, well, we got to bring back Ripley. How do we do that? Well, we got to clone her. Well, why would we ever clone her? Well, because she also has the Xenomorph DNA in her. So, clone her to make the new queen. And it's like, okay, but why would we need to go through all those steps? Well, because there's no more. We haven't found them anyplace else in the universe. And, it's just more and more absurdities to get to that point. And that stems from Alien 3. Because you can argue that comes from Aliens, where one of the Weyland-Yutani people says, an X number of planets, we've never ever encountered a creature like this. But remember, Ripley said very clearly it was not native to that planet. It came from someplace else. So back in Aliens, she understood those were not all of them in all likelihood. Not to mention, a person from Weyland-Yutani could be lying. Like, they are kind of the bad guys. So, anyway, like I said, I think all the problems from the movie ultimately stem from trying to make a sequel like Alien, but existing in a world where aliens exist, and having to follow aliens. I think those are the big mistakes. I think they could have just found another way to make an offshoot to not follow Ripley anymore. And I think it would have been very easy to say that a ship escaped, and some eggs were on board, someone with a chest burst or whatever. And now those people are having to deal with problems out there. I think that would have been just fine. Because I think trying to attach yourself to a main character like that, especially in this kind of deal where like it was a chance occurrence, well, probably a chance occurrence, we'll see what happens on Alien Earth, I guess, that they even ran into the xenomorph, like, and they're rare enough, because we established in Aliens, again, if Whalen Tony isn't lying, that they haven't come across many places else. So you're going to have to keep continually coming up with more and more contrived scenarios for this same person to keep winding up in these same situations. It's kind of like Die Hard. I like the Die Hard movies, but they're not to be taken seriously. Because how does John McClane continue to find himself in these situations? That's why you really don't care for Die Hard 2. Because it's so close to the first one, and it's just a case of like, really? Like, what are the real odds of this happening? Whereas Die Hard 3 is a matter of the bad guy came looking for him because he killed his brother back in the first movie. So, there's a reason why it happened to him there. That's why 3 is a better sequel. 3 is pretty good in my opinion. It's as good as the first one. And so, it made sense. So here, to have it keep falling on Ripley, so Aliens makes sense because, like, well, we've not found him anyplace else. She's the only person with any experience. Let's bring her. But after that, like, you're starting to run out of reasons to involve Ripley. And so they should have established, just moving on. Because if we look at the other Alien movies, all the prequels, the only characters that are the same between Prometheus and Covenant are David, and they mention Dr. Shaw, but she dies between the two movies. Presumably David killed her. And then Romulus has no characters. We have a robot that's the same type as Ash, but it's a different robot, and that's it. We have no overlapping characters. It's a totally different set of individuals. Alien Earth, no overlapping characters so far. Still a few episodes left as of this recording. So I think the newer movies figured that out. Whereas the older movies kept trying to be following Ripley, and it doesn't work. It's not like, say, the Terminator, where the whole point is the Terminators are coming back after very specific people, the same very specific people. So of course it's going to keep happening to those people. It's a different scenario. It's a different setup. So yeah, like I said, it all comes down to the big problem is this is a sequel to Aliens, and a continuation of that story. Almost all the problems flow from that. And again, it's an entertaining movie. It's fine. It's an okay movie, but it's built from bad ideas and bad parts. And so it's not going to be remembered in the same voices as Alien and Aliens. Those are going to be remembered as two of the greatest movies ever made. Alien is one of the greatest horror movies ever made, and Alien is one of the greatest action movies ever made. Alien 3 is the mediocre sequel to those movies. Alien Resurrection is the bad sequel to those movies. Prometheus looks really pretty. Covenant looks nice, and it was clear that the fan demand wanted xenomorphs, so they got them. Romulus, I think, will go down as the third in the series, third best in the series. I got to watch it a few more times, let it settle for a few years to really make that judgment. Could just be recency bias, but so anyway. Let me know what you folks think down in the comments section. Do you like Alien 3 with the others? Which one do you like the best among the, what are we at now? 7 Alien movies? Are you watching Alien Earth? If this is somewhere down the road that you see this, did you watch Alien Earth? Has the Romulus sequel come out yet? Just let me know what you think about the Alien franchise in general. Is it a mistake to try to intertwine it with the Predator franchise? Does that benefit either franchise? It seems to have rejuvenated the Predator franchise. But, yeah. So, let me know what you guys think. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Sharing, commenting, help us grow the channel. I'd like to thank everyone who's helped us get over 550 recently, as far as subscribers. As of this recording, we're actually like around 570. So, thank you to all you new folks who've come along. If you've seen this far and you're one of the new folks, let me know what video prompted you to sign up. I'm just kind of curious. I can check the demographic data to, I'm sorry, analytic data to see. But I'm always curious, what brought someone around to actually subscribing. Haven't got a lot of comments about that, but I'm curious. But yeah, that's all I've really got for this one. So just remember, in space, no one can hear you scream.
Game over, man. It's game